Pretty sure this is not anything to do with a question in the exam, but I wanted to bring it up. Is the bid rigging is having a qualification like, or I had a girl with a company call me and ask about you guys. Do you guys want to bid on this project? And I had another guy who I had, underbid the job. And he called me and he said, do you have a crew? Do you have enough people? But at the same time, I have been hired as an employee for, like, I would say every job, every single construction job that I've ever worked in my entire life. That contractor won the bid and did not already have a crew that could do the job. That's why they go hiring people. So did those contractors all lie and say that they're all set up and take the job that way? Or is it that these GCs they already have their who they want to use picked out, and even though me or somebody like me underbid the contract on somebody else, they're taking the subcontractor that they like and they're not saying it's because I like him, it's because I went to high school with somebody who's in the management or whatever. They're saying you're not qualified because you don't have all of these traits that the other contractor that bid it does. Like, so is that bid rigging when they know each other and they know how one contractor set up and then they toss out the others because they're not set up in the same way? That's a question. Here's part of what I think is in the test. So there's add labor burden. These you incur costs such as employment taxes and insurance. These obligations add approximately 30% to your labor cost. This additional amount is referred to as labor burden. So I guess you take your insurance and such and put that in your quote. And what you gotta remember is that is called the labor burden. And then there's equipment needed to complete the job is referred to is figured as a direct cost of the project and added to your estimate. If there's a crane, you have to add that to the cost. Small trucks and small tools are considered an indirect cost. These are added to the project overhead. So you got to think about a crane or let's say like a bulldozer or something that your company doesn't already have that it needs for the job would be a direct cost, which I think is exactly a question in the test. It's something that your company doesn't have that it needs for the job. And so I was thinking, like, what if the job you're gonna need, like a special kind of blade, or let's say your company just doesn't have, we'll say something simple like a wheelbarrow, and you got to go buy a wheelbarrow. That is a direct cost. And then a small tool or a pickup truck. Well, I guess a small tool would be project overhead, so a wheelbarrow would be overhead. But then it starts talking about how you bill for the use of a tool. But I'm pretty sure that's not in the test. That's more for something that you would need to know when you're estimating. Here's one of those questions with the answer here. The historical information from the past year is the best way to predict overhead in the following year. Overhead percentages generally average between 5% and 20%. So it's best to calculate the overhead rates specific to your company. So for overhead, what you're basically doing is you're charging for the office rent, accounting fees, taxes, legal fees, administrative labor. So you're basically charging the customer for, let's say a job is going to go on for a year, and your office, you're charging them all the costs of your office, including your daughter who picks up the phone and her salary. You're charging them for all that coffee, all that crap, the office, everything that's going on in the office. You're charging the customer, and you're telling them this is how much it is to operate the business. And I always wonder, let's say me personally, I bid on a dozen jobs. I wrote an estimate for a dozen jobs and I got none of them. Do I bill the next estimate I write for those last 12 because there was no income, and that costed me what would have been that many hours? So do you bill for your loss? That's a question that I have, but the question that's in the test is, they ask if you should use the historical information from the past year for an overhead. There's something, I don't remember exactly how they worded it, but it was something just like that. Add up all your project overhead costs from last year. Divide your project overhead costs by your revenues found on your income statement. So I have a feeling like one thing, the contract management, I just read this whole chapter and I didn't really see anything that jumped out at me like this is a question, but I know that contract management is a section in the test. I don't remember how many questions of the test, so it might have been a small thing. It might have been an easy question, which is why I didn't make any notes or remember it. But if it was a question, I think I'm thinking with the pattern of the way this book is to the test, the contracting methods, and then single prime method being the traditional form of contracting. The contract project owner typically hires an architectural firm to design the contract. The contractor then performs the work according to the specifications of the project and is responsible for the cost of all materials and labor to obtain project complete. Or design build. That's what I do. Design build. I should get a, I'm starting to think that subbing everything out is more reliable and more like cost efficient than doing everything and designing everything. And when you design everything, you're really stealing a design from somebody else. So it's really just stealing the design, slapping that on a property. But I mean, I could design houses, and it's not like I didn't go to college for this, but you could sub everything out. You could hire everything out. But anyway, that's how I advertise. I do freaking everything. Design, build, construction management. Sounds like they just hand something off. This is for bigger jobs. And then turnkey. Turnkey construction is similar to design build. In addition to managing the construction, the contractor also obtains financing and land. Under the turnkey model, the construction firm is obligated to complete a project according to pre-specified criteria, but with expanded principles and liability. The price is generally fixed at the time the contract is signed. I have a feeling like that might be for tract homes. I can't think of anywhere else where that would be used. Fast track construction. Under fast track construction management, the construction process begins before completion of the contract documents. Fast track construction involves a phased approach to the project. A contract may be drawn up for each phase. Generally, the cost is not fixed until the construction documents are complete and some construction commitments are already been made. I can see that happening if they divide up the job and somebody comes out and they're gonna do the, like the foundation, and then but they haven't bid the rest of the project yet, or maybe if they like the name kind of says to me, like if it's a government project or like a government housing or something like that, or a company that needs a new facility, maybe for like a warehouse structure, and they say, we need this, and then somebody says, okay, we'll build it, and they sell them that they found the land. They go, we found this piece of land, and or maybe they even have a piece of land. A lot of construction companies have land. They go, we have all this land over here, we'll build that right there. And they start building, and they start getting the money for it. And at the same time, they start designing the house or designing the thing. I mean, I could see that happening if they are piecing the project out, or maybe if the contractor had the land and basically they're selling them the whole experience of buying land and building a structure. All right. I see that happening. Multiple prime contracts. Large construction projects may involve multiple prime contracts. The owner may contract with two or more prime contractors to complete the same project. This contracting method may integrate elements of the construction management and fast-track construction models. The owner takes on a more active role in managing the different prime contractors. Contractor and owner obligations must be clearly defined in the contract. I've seen definitely government contracts where basically they operate as if the government is the prime contractor. So, like one job I was working for a subcontractor, and GE was doing the big work in this facility, but we were a subcontractor. We weren't even a subcontractor for GE. We were a subcontractor for like the facility, I think. So maybe GE's number was just too much, and they contracted a piece of the project to GE, and they contracted just anyway. They could sub and have multiple prime, or they could, I guess whenever they have multiple contractors, it's multiple prime. And partnering. starts with setting common objectives and goals for a construction project. All parties involved, such as the owner, design professionals, engineers, and subcontractors, work together to achieve these objectives and goals. Several meetings are held throughout the bid and construction process to evaluate the decisions made by all parties, and adjustments occur when necessary. Partnering increases commission and trust, consequently reducing potential litigation and claims. So I think keywords maybe that might be in the exam: turnkey, they're obligated to complete the project according to pre-specified criteria with expanded responsibilities and liability. The price generally fixed at the time the contract is signed. Or design build. Or single prime. So this might be something to do with a question, and I think I almost remember the word turnkey, and I think that the word turnkey is in the glossary, and that might be the answer that I went with on something. But that page was making something click. It was seemed like something that was in the test. Types of construction contracts. Lump sum contract. The contractor agrees to complete the project for a predetermined specified price. The contractor essentially assumes all the risk under this contract agreement because the contractor is responsible for additional costs associated with unforeseen circumstances. For example, if extra cost is incurred due to inclement weather, the contractor must absorb these costs. Conversely, the contractor gets to keep any cost savings achieved. If you use this type of contract, you may be required to formally submit a specific schedule and your quality assurance program so your customer knows you're completing the project to the highest standards. Utilized contract most plans and specifications are detailed enough that final cost can be determined in advance. Unit price contract. A unit price contract may be used for jobs where the extent of work cannot be fully determined, or the actual quantities of required items cannot be accurately calculated in advance. a price per unit is calculated for each item, and the contractor is paid according to the actual quantities used. Cost plus contract. Using cost plus contract method, the contractor is reimbursed for the actual cost of labor and materials and is paid a markup fee for overhead and profit. The cost plus contract can be calculated different ways. The owner may pay the actual cost plus a percentage markup for a fixed fee markup. They call that T&M job 2. And the unit price contract, I've been on one of those where the contractor was a concrete contractor and every piece of the sidewalk was its own separate contract. So they had a contract for basically each little chunk of sidewalk. And they had stairs. They had a staircase that was made out of concrete, and that was its own contract. And a lot of people say that that's how you keep your, if you have a limit of 50,000 or you have a limit of, 750,000, whatever your limit is, unless you have an unlimited contractor license. But if you have a limited contractor's license, then a lot of times you'll go with the unit price contract, and you'll do multiple contracts on the same site. But I'm pretty sure that this is in the test. You have to know this. And I'm not sure what the question was, but I think the answer was lump sum contract. Might have been, what is a contract when a contractor agrees to complete the project for a predetermined specified price. And then the answer would be lump sum contract. I think that might be a question in the exam. Here's a question that's in there. They ask about what methods of estimating, and I don't remember exactly what, but there's takeoff, and I think that was the answer to the question. Like, what's the most popular, or what's the most, particular, or what goes into the estimate the most and needs the most calculations? Takeoff. Or like the most complicated? Takeoff. I don't remember exactly what the question was, but takeoff was, I think, the answer to the question. And then other methods of estimating. Quantity takeoff is generally the most accurate way to estimate. That's the question. It's like, what's the most accurate way to estimate? But there are other methods you can use. Conceptual estimate is generally prepared by the architect using cost models from previous projects. The contractor may arrive at a much different cost because of the project's unique characteristics. So the conceptual estimate from an architect. Using the square foot method of estimating the project cost calculation of square footage. This is a quick way to arrive at an estimated cost, but this method does not count project specifics that affect costs. That would be like if you just say, yeah, I paint for $2 a foot. you throw a lot of square foot estimates. Just anybody just throw a square foot estimate out. And unit price method. For example, let's say it's 2,000 square foot, and it's $2 per foot. It goes towards the cost factors, labor, materials, equipment. And I don't see the difference between that and the square foot method, but I guess unit price, I guess that would be more like if you're, I don't know why they give a square foot of concrete slab when a square foot of the concrete slab is more for a square foot estimating. I would put the unit price more for like windows or like if you're hanging cabinets, then you would go with the unit price estimate. And I really hate that. These are like for general estimates. You really have to do a takeoff before you give them a specific price and make a contract. Because if you got contracts going off of a unit price, you're gonna run into things like you're gonna see that one of the units is way in the back. Like, let's say this building. So if there's a cabinet that's like, we'll say like in here, like way in the back, but you gotta go and walk all the way this way, all the way this way, you know, and it's like a maze to get to that cabinet in the back of the building, then you're gonna spend another extra hours getting to that one spot to hang that one cabinet. So that's what you need to take off for it so you could really look at the job and look at the thing. I mean, it doesn't happen all the time. You know, like you can see the inside of this building. I think this is the fire station they put down there in North Little Rock. Right at the end of the Main Street bridge. But that was, I think, Alessi Keys. I know I worked for that company before. But,
Hey, baby. Oh, hi.
so,
Good.
but you don't see that all. But
What's that?
you definitely have to go from there to take off.